Hey guys, welcome to Real Life, Real Beauty, episode 6. I'm Kale Summerlin, the host, and today's episode is another collaborative episode with Noah Mears. Our guest today is Timothy David Conley. He was on the last episode, and we had so much fun with him that we decided to do another episode, although not quite as long. This episode, we talk about screenwriting, and the episode's title is Gotta Keep Digging. And if you want to know why we called it that, then you might as well give it a listen. So, thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So, this is the intro. Hey guys, we're going to talk about screenwriting and other stuff. We decided to come back because we had so much fun.
You wrote a book, didn't you? Or are you trying to write a book?
Okay, explain. I've tried to write multiple books.
You're trying. Oh, that's fair. So,
all right.
So you don't do screenwriting, but you do write.
Yeah, I do write. I write.
You can have thoughts.
Yeah, I actually write a lot of things. But yeah, we'll
Your
get to
thoughts
that.
are valid. It's not just me knowing. All right,
My thoughts aren't valid.
Your thoughts exist.
They do.
At least, at minimum.
Yo.
Anyway. All right.
Yeah, man.
So we were talking about screenwriting, specifically like how we do it, I guess, versus the general concept of it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of misconceptions when you talk about screenwriting, and there's a lot of people who don't even know what screenwriting is. They're like, I don't know, they clump playwriting in there together, and it's frustrating for like a screenwriter because it's like,
there's no stage left, stage right in a screenplay.
Yeah, and we're not in like a closed area. Like one of my friends talked about that on one of our podcasts about how you're writing mainly dialogue because you don't have a lot of action, you don't have a lot of area. But no, I love screenwriting. I was talking to you about like your process of screenwriting, kind of where you started, what started it for you.
So I think I answered wrong when we were talking because technically I started writing early high school when you and me did that film with Michael Lindley, who was on here, about like the dream sequence and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I had to write a script for that, and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and it was not correct at all. But that was my start into screenwriting. And then in college, we actually went through like, okay, here's what you're supposed to do. Here's how it works. Here's some programs you can use, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, this is a thing. All right. And then I actually started writing legitimately. So that was kind of where that started, early college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my biggest like moment was, again, like I told you, reading this like Fantastic Beasts 2 script, like in print. That's and awesome. I was like, this is interesting how this is working out. And then I Googled screenplays, and it was really cool because I would sit there and I had probably like 45 hopefully legally downloaded screenplays from like movies, and I would read like Pulp Fiction all the time, and I love Pulp Fiction. Like just reading Pulp Fiction.
I got a controversial take on Tarantino. I think he's a better writer than a director.
That is valid, though.
I think he's a better writer than a director, and he's a great director. But still, I think he's a better writer.
Yeah, I definitely think when you look at like when he focused on writing, which is again the 90s, when and True Romance is a good example of that. True Romance is one of his best written films. Natural Born Killers, he worked on that. It's kind of controversial, but as far as like how much he worked on, with Oliver Stone. But like True Romance, I love True Romance. I love the writing in True Romance. Really?
I need to.
Oh my goodness. If you love Francis Ford Coppola, I'm not going to spoil it for you.
Spoil it.
But there's a scene in the movie that is extremely pivotal that involves Francis Ford Coppola's cinematic take from Apocalypse Now.
Ooh.
It's so
now I gotta see it.
You have to, even if you just watch the scene itself.
I'll watch it. I gotta see it now.
It's amazing. Like, I love True Romance.
Man, that's awesome. Very cool.
Dude, I even remember, so I've actually written a couple scripts, but I haven't written,
I've
never made any of them. I did.
And looking back at it, I reread it a couple months ago, and it is very, it's a good story, and it's a good book. It's a book. It's less of a script. It's definitely a book. You wrote a book.
I'm apparently an author.
You wrote
apparently
a book.
I'm a book writer, not a screenwriter.
Yeah. And the first like 8 pages is just explaining who the characters are and like their history or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So you wrote you know how like some books have the maps at the beginning? Kale did that with the script, but it wasn't really a script. It didn't become a script. But it was good. I think I rewrote it for my class to fit a script.
Yeah.
A screenplay.
Because I remember it was high school, and you were like desperate for ideas. You were like starving. You're like, we need to make something. And you're like, okay, Kale, here's my prompt.
I had that itch.
You said, okay, because we have essentially no budget, I'm going to make a film that's going to be like one booth in a restaurant with 2 people. Make a film off of that. And I was like, that's really confining, but I'll try. Yeah. And I did. So I was pretty proud of that.
I still like this, or at least my version of it.
The revised version.
Yeah, we finished pre-production on that. I had a cast. I had a grip. I had a DP. He had this whole system. He was gonna make this fake dolly out of his skateboard and all this stuff.
Wow.
It was gonna be hype. And the literal day before, I tested positive for COVID, and it was terrible. And then everybody, in the week after, a couple of actors were moving, and a bunch of other stuff. So it completely fell through. I never picked it up again. And then I never made something of that scale till recently with the new one I made, Happy Non-Entity, and that was 2020. So it's been a few years.
Wow.
It took years to recover from that. It was terrible, but you learn from your mistakes. Though I should have planned more and had backup plans.
So you said like it was a better book than a screenplay. So like, what have you learned about?
Yeah. So when you're writing a screenplay, and correct me if I'm wrong, because a lot of this is just from me guessing, because sometimes my teachers and stuff would kind of ramble, and I was like, I think this is what he's saying. I could be wrong. So you're writing just based on the visual. You're not like, you don't write, this person felt like this, because you have to show how they felt. And that's the whole point of what you're watching. No one's telling you anything unless they're narrating, and then that usually doesn't work out anyway in the end. But when you would write, because you're writing a book, you write, this person thought this and this, and they felt like this, and this thing happened. And then that would translate, and that would make sense when you're reading it. But then if you're trying to film it, it's like, well, how do we make them look like they're doing this and this? And
yeah, like you said, anything that cannot be visually perceived or heard, anything you can't see or hear doesn't need to be in there. Exactly. Now you can tell them to display this emotion, and again, when you're writing for actors, you're gonna want to give them a little bit of something to kind of put them through the like mode, I guess, get them into character.
My favorite, like almost a fourth wall break, but I read the script for Blade Runner, the original script, in college. And at the very end of it, after it says cut to black and everything, handwritten in the PDF from Ridley Scott, it says, God help us all, right at the end. And I was like, well, that sets a tone. If you're reading this and you're trying to make it, that helps. So it has nothing to do with the actual, like what you're hearing or seeing or anything like that, but it does help set the tone.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Screenwriting is so, like, it makes sense for me. Like, it clicks. Like, if you love movies, screenwriting just clicks for you. And it just takes time to kind of like you were talking about, getting used to the format. Formatting is really difficult for a lot of writers. It took me from when I started screenwriting at like 17 to when I actually understood formatting at like 20.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with it, especially since I haven't used any actual like software in a while. I've been using a Google.
Yeah.
So a lot of like the page numbering, the scene numbering, all that stuff, I just haven't been able to do because this is way too much effort on a Google Doc. But there's a lot of those things I know I need. So I'm going to invest in some program.
And I know that Google has some of the like extensions. Yeah, there was one I was using for a little bit, but it was kind of janky. It was kind of like weird in certain areas.
A lot of reviews haven't been good for a lot of those.
Google Docs is just so hard to screenwrite on. I tried that for years, and it was just if you don't have good format, it makes the writing process so difficult, and it like destroys you. You don't feel like you want to write in. You're like, oh, this is draining me. Yeah,
it doesn't feel like you're
draining.
actually creating something. I agree with that. Yeah, and then when you go to like terms of story, with your screenplay or whatever you're writing, but specifically for a screenplay, I always have to have it visualized beforehand. I have to have it written in my head. And then I'm watching the movie in my head, and then I'm relaying what I'm seeing. So that way I don't write any emotions or things that wouldn't be seen. So I'm kind of, I'm almost pushing myself to a state where I'm almost like hallucinating, quote unquote, when I'm writing. I know, like, if you know Jim Cummings, Thunder Road, he talks about how he has to get drunk before he writes, which I don't advise doing, just for audio listeners.
And Aaron Sorkin chain smokes when he writes.
Well, he's also Aaron Sorkin.
That's valid.
He does a lot of things.
Yeah, that's true. Aaron Sorkin's special in that regard.
He's a special man.
No, like you said, something you brought up and it came to mind is like how does coming up with a story work for you as far as movies?
So for me, it's interesting. It comes in, I guess, 3 chunks. You could kind of take one of them and put it into another one. So you could say 2. The first one, I believe every film director tells the same story over and over again to an extent, and it might look and feel and seem different with different themes, but you can always tie it back into something else they've made.
Yeah.
And there's always, and sometimes you'll see directors and they'll make a ton of films and only one of them is really good. Take like Silence of the Lambs. I forget the name of the guy who made that, but everything else he made was very much just dramas. Like he made Philadelphia, which was really good, but outside of that, outside of everything everything else was just okay. So sometimes directors have one good story. So I've been trying to figure out what that story is for me, and then trying to figure out how to mold that into a larger thematic thing. Like, so for this next one, it's about a bunch of people who are at a party alone, kind of feeling sad, a lot like my last film, but the tone and the style and everything else is going to feel and look very different, but you can get similar ideas and thoughts out of it. So that's the first thing I do, is I look kind of into myself and do that. The second thing I do is I do everything that every other creator does, and I steal from people, right?
Absolutely.
I read a thing about plays a while back, specifically Shakespeare, where he talked about what the people were reading when he was writing to try to connect to other things. And it seemed like every single story within Western culture, and I mean, I'm a Western guy, so most of what I'm going to write is going to end up feeling very Western, it stems from like a religious text, usually the Bible. So I was like, okay, well, what, like, if I pick up that and start stealing from like the parables of Jesus or something, how could that fit in a way that makes sense? Because people are going to click with that, because even look at something like Spider-Man ties into stuff in the Old Testament. It's weird. It's really crazy how everything ties back in. So for like my short film, Happy Non-Entity, I stole a bunch from the book of Ecclesiastes a lot, which Kale likes a lot. It's a good book. So those are 2. So stealing from history and the Bible, and then looking at myself and, okay, what am I actually trying to like tell in these stories? So I look at those 2 things, and then I come up with an idea, and then I take that idea and I try to put it on a page. So that's what my process is.
Got you.
So that was really long. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. I feel like mine is extremely chaotic now that you say that. Because
I needed a focus, because if mine gets chaotic, I tell like 4 stories, and then they don't make any sense at the end, and I'm like sad. Yeah.
I get that though, because like sometimes I'll be writing something and it'll like I'll have 4 different narratives, and it's like this is not gonna work at the end. But it's so weird how like a movie comes to me, because it's all one scene based. Like I will think of one specific scene, and this scene can be in act 1, 2, or 3, but it's like I see something, I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. Yeah. And then I start building around it, and I start building backwards and building forward. And it's like
you get an image and a thing, and you're like, that's cool. I need to film that. So what else do I have to film to make that?
Exactly.
I do feel that. I do get that.
Like a good example is last night, me and my friends went to Cookout.
Yeah.
So we were driving, and there was this like red car, and I hope nobody steals this idea because I'm about to write the script. But there was this red car sitting like in the pavement, and it had this weird like neon sign in the dash, and I was like, that's like very like ominous, like weird. Yeah. And I sat there and I thought about it a little bit more and a little bit more, and I was like, what if like there's just this guy walking down the sidewalk and it's dark and you only see like street lights over his face, and it feels it even not black and white because I want the neon
but
coming in there,
but like that
a little bit, that weird like texture,
like
almost.
Drive almost.
Exactly. And there's like this bright red car sitting in this empty parking lot with this little neon sign on the dash that reads like open, or just like come in, or something where you're like, do I go to this car? Do I not? This feels like a trap. Is it not? Like that one car sitting in that parking lot made me be like, there you can create a whole story around this one specific scene. And it's just about, I guess, scene building versus like story building. I don't really story build as much as I scene build, because I know exactly what I want my characters to do in each scene I want.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's like a cohesive thing.
It really is.
Like you have the scene focus, but the characters are part of that kind of a thing. And
that's cool.
I hope nobody steals that idea. I don't know if it's even that good, but I'm excited to start writing that.
That's cool.
It feels very like you could make it horror, you could make it drama, you could. I don't know. I'm excited. I come up with like a different. That's something else I was going to ask you. How often do you come up with a movie idea? Like, how often does it hit you where you're just like, because like 3 or 4 times a day, I will be like, that'd be a good movie. That'd be good. And I don't even write half of them.
You got to write them down. Like, don't lose it.
Yeah, I know.
My dad
I've gotten
does
better.
I'll just be like hanging out at the house. And my dad will walk in my room. He's like, I thought of a movie and I'm telling it to you. And I'm like, okay. And then he'll tell me, and I'm like, I guess that was all right. And he's like, oh, you should make it. And then he'll leave. And I'm like, all right.
My dad will do the same thing. My dad will be like, what if? And then he'll start talking about like.
I keep telling, he's a great writer. I keep telling him to write them down, but he never does. But sometimes it's like a bunch a day if I feel really inspired.
Yeah.
But usually I'm very obsessive. So if I have one idea, it doesn't leave me until I finish it and I don't think of anything else. So like once I finished Happy Non-Entity, I sat down, I was like, I don't know what to write next. And then I started thinking of ideas. And I had this another Google Doc that was just a bullet point list of all these names for a movie. And each one in my mind had a story with it already. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, what do I do here? How do I make any of these? And my problem every time is, well, I don't have a budget. So like I have an idea right now that hit me yesterday. For like, I don't know if you play any indie games, but what was the name of it? Something like Iron Lung.
I know what you're talking about.
You're isolated in the submarine in this ocean made of blood.
Yes.
And like you're trying to find, you're taking pictures, everything around you, trying to figure out where you are.
Yeah.
I saw Markiplier play that on YouTube. I can't believe I said that out loud. Anyway, and then it gave me, and I saw people try to do. Like isolated horror stuff underwater with a movie underwater. I didn't watch it, but people try that a lot. But I was thinking, why can't you just do the thing underwater? That would be really cool. Like in a sub, everybody's isolated, nobody really knows what's going on, everybody's going crazy, but it's underwater and like there's so you can't leave. There's no like way to get out of this. And there's so I had an idea. I have a couple scenes in my head that I won't say that are kind of interesting, but I wanted to try my hand at a horror in a submarine. I'd like to do that.
And you talk about like production design. That's going to be
crazy.
It's going to crazy, but it's also easy.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it feels like a little bit easy because again, you are in a confined space. You don't have to worry about park scenes. You don't got to worry about this.
I just had to write it.
That does sound like really intense. Claustrophobia,
especially if something's outside, or like somebody starts thinking something's outside that's like trying to get them or something.
Oh yeah,
it goes crazy, and you can do like little hints of a monster and stuff.
Like the Kraken or something. Oh, the TV did that.
And kind of how like space used to be this place where we're like, what's out there? Now the oceans is kind of become that, where we really don't know what's in the ocean still. Mm-hmm. So you can mess with that a ton. But anyway, TV died.
The TV did die. That happened on one of my podcasts,
I think it's telling me to
and I literally went straight audio because of it. I was like, that's disruptive.
That's fun. Roll with it. Hey, thanks, tech director.
Thank you.
Anyway.
But no, yeah.
Any other ideas or questions? What how do you get stories?
Yeah.
Because you write books.
I write things. Okay, so I do. So when I was 14, I wanted to write this story, and I won't go into it because once again, I don't want anyone to steal my ideas. But it was kind of the same thing where like a scene comes to my head. It's a visual scene, but at the same time, there's kind of character arcs and emotions tied to it. So like in my mind, I have the cinematic scenes that I want to happen. And then like you said, they could be anywhere. It's like, okay, it could be in the intro, it could be at the very end. And what kind of ended up happening for me was I had the beginning and the end.
Okay. Ooh. That makes so much sense.
And I don't have the middle. Well, that's the problem. I started writing and I wrote myself into the ground, which I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, you just got to pull yourself back up though. You got to be like, okay, I have this right here and I have this. All that's in the way is literally this right here. So again, it is tough to get over. I get you. It's so tough to get over that hump sometimes. But you just got to keep digging until you figure out where you're at.
Yeah, and that's why I haven't trashed it completely.
Gotta keep digging.
Gotta keep digging. That's the name. Gotta keep digging. All right, the name of this episode. Gotta keep digging. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'll have that. In terms, with poems, it's a lot weirder because, like with poems, Poems are very emotion based. So if I come home from a very good day, what's interesting is my joyful poems tend to be shorter and my darker poems tend to be longer because it takes a lot more words to describe trying to make sense of something broken, but it takes a lot less words to say this is good.
Yeah, that's fair.
And there's kind of a lightness to it. Like there's a lightness and there's a heaviness, but So I just get inspired when I'm like, this is something that I want to put down concretely, that I will know exactly how I was feeling when I come back to it. And that's kind of the point of poems. And so sometimes I'll reread a poem and I'm like, yeah, I didn't even mean to write it that good. That just perfectly says.
Yeah. If from what I've read, because you gave me a little mini book of some of your poems, it seems to be just an extension of you just kind of ripping your soul out and throwing it on a page to an extent.
Yeah.
And I think that's what good
Finally.
poetry is. And that makes me really happy that you have something like that.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do that, but I'm not. I'm good at visuals, not like emotions.
You made a photo book. And
I
that
did.
inspire
I have
me.
3 photo books published on Amazon. Just check them
Yeah.
out. If you Google Timothy David Conley, they come up. If you Google it.
Yeah, they're good. I highly recommend. He's got a big, thick, hardbound one. It's nice.
Yeah.
A lot of good pictures.
I messed up the cover though. It's 2 tones of black and it messes me every time I look at it. Anyway. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Dead Space. I feel like I was going to say something else.
That's a good game, Dead Space. Anyway.
That is a good game.
Yeah.
Dead Space 2.
The remake though.
That's
The
true.
remake's better. Anyway. I believe we have to wrap up from what I understand.
Yeah.
She's giving me hand signals.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Turn it off. Cut it out.
All right, cool. Oh, I feel like I had something more to say on screenwriting, but I don't remember.
Did you have a question?
Hey, so we got Stanley Kubrick here.
Brought Kubrick back for the sequel.
He asked if he could give some advice. So here. We're going to have to censor all of that. That was extremely controversial. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate you. Kale closes.
Thanks. All right, guys. Thanks for listening to this collaborative episode of Real Life, Real Beauty and A Cup of Film with Noah Mears. I'm Kale Summerlin. You can follow me on Instagram.
I'm Noah Mears. You can follow the podcast at A Cup of Film Podcast on Instagram.
He's Timothy Conley.
I'm Timothy David Conley.
Timothy David
If
Conley.
you Google
You
me,
can
I come
follow
up
him.
now. Yeah, it's crazy.
You come up now, dude. That's great. I'm
It's
so
awesome.
excited.
I'm very excited.
You're on Google.
I'm on Google.
So yeah, thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye.
Bye. It's a wrap. So I feel like there was something else I was gonna ask, but I was blanking.